Today we'll be presenting on the South Sudan crisis, which started in 2013 and is ongoing to this day. Rebellions in Sudan intensified after 2010 with military defections, such as Lieutenant General George Athor Dang leading the Democratic Movement, as well as subgroups such as the Cobra and Upper Nile factions. Used what is known as the Big Tent strategy, which boiled down to paying off these militias and pardoning the leaders. The militias were supposed to reintegrate into the army, but usually ended up defecting within a year. This led to a vicious cycle of betrayal, which exacerbated the already growing violence against the ethnic groups such as the Merle and the Shilluk. We can see the divide and ethnic breakdown throughout the country. Primary groups in power are the Dinka, where the president hails from, and the Nuer, where the vice president is from. The Nuer Right Army was responsible for much of the transgressions against smaller ethnic groups such as the Merle, while tensions with the Dinka accentuated the oncoming crisis.
This is the timeline for the South Sudan crisis. It began in June of 2013 when President Kerr dismissed his finance minister and cabinet affairs minister over a multi-million-dollar scandal. In July of 2013, then dismissed his entire cabinet, including his vice president. In 2013, civil war begins in South Sudan. In January of 2014, a ceasefire is signed, but is broken several times. In August of 2014, peace talks began in Ethiopia's capital. In November of 2016, the UN fires commander of Kenyan peace forces, and Kenya withdraws its peacekeepers. Sudan peacekeepers take over. In December of 2016, the UN Commission declares ethnic cleansing is occurring in South Sudan. President Kerr denies this. As you can see, this is 3 years after the conflict has begun that the UN declares ethnic cleansing. Then lastly, in February 2017, the UN declares a famine in parts of South Sudan. Now we will discuss the description of disaster events and impacts in South Sudan. It's the third largest refugee crisis in the world right now, and 3.6 million have left their homes. Violence erupted when President of South Sudan accused the vice president of an attempted coup back in 2011. There's been a more recent wave of violence. Just in July 2016, a violent outbreak in Juba resulted in 300 dead and 40,000 displaced in just a matter of days. The South Sudanese pound has steadily lost value, and the cost of goods and services has increased dramatically, contributing to an economic crisis. South Sudan has the highest inflation rate in the entire world at 835%. In the beginning of 2017, a famine was officially declared, leaving thousands starving, and a loss of crops in areas. The United Nations has been the main response agency for the South Sudan crisis. In 2011, the United Nations passed Security Council Resolution 1996. This established a humanitarian mission that is up for renewal every 2 years. Then, in 2014, the UN passed Security Council 2155, which added a military component to the humanitarian mission. Last renewed in 2016. The current budget for the South Sudan crisis is over $1 billion. Then on the right, you can see the current UN agencies that are involved in this crisis. There have been great challenges to the humanitarian response in South Sudan. Assaults on aid caravans and stealing supplies has become increasingly common, which has led it to be difficult and dangerous to reach families in need of survival. Since 1/3 have been displaced, it's hard to manage a response and to analyze the amount of people in need of aid. Violence has prevented villages from planting crops as well, which has led to this man-made famine. The lack of infrastructure and clean water sources have left populations to diseases. Lack of formal infrastructure has made it difficult to distribute resources, especially during the rainy season when many of these roads are impassable. Also, bouts of peace agreements and then times of violent outbursts has prevented a successful response to this crisis in South Sudan.